Welcome back to another episode of Locker Room Buzz. You know when that country music hits, it's time for another hour of sports talk. How's everybody doing today? Obviously, the weather is getting a little bit cooler out there. We have Halloween this weekend. Looking forward to all of that. Always feel free to call in here at 610-701-9243. If you're going to call in, just call in during a break. I can get you on air. We can talk about whatever you want. Lots to cover today. College football, obviously hot as always. I'll give you guys a few of my takes, and I'll give you guys my first prediction here of the top 10 ranking in college football. We also have the World Series, and what a series it's been so far. Currently tied 2-2. I'll be getting into all that in just a bit. Also with baseball, going to be discussing a few things with Bryce Harper and everything that's been going on here with all this discussion about the payroll, and if it's too much, too little, we'll get into all of that. And then in the NFL, the Eagles pick up a big win, but A.J. Brown was not a part of it. Is that something that we need to discuss? We'll talk about that as well. But as I mentioned before, let's get right into what's been going on here in the baseball world of things. Obviously, our Philadelphia Phillies have not been a part of it for a bit now, which has been a little depressing, but you sit here and you look at the World Series we have, and it's at least one that's entertaining, and that keeps going back and forth. It's not a complete wash. So starting at Game 1 here, we are in Toronto. The Dodgers lose to the Blue Jays 11-4. That Blue Jays offense really started to catch some fire there in the 6th inning, putting up 9 runs in that inning. You also had Addison Barger come off here as a pinch hitter and hit a grand slam, the first ever grand slam by a pinch hitter in World Series history. So very interesting there. Game 2 was a different story as the Dodgers head into Toronto, win that one 5-1. Yamamoto going 9 innings pitched, allowing 4 hits, 1 earned run, and 8 Ks. He has been absolutely lethal when it comes to this World Series and this postseason in general. That is now his second complete game within this playoff push. Then you go to Game 3. Dodgers win this one 6-5 over the Blue Jays in 18 innings. And I just love the fact that it went to 18 innings because you look at the regular season now and how it's very much sped up and they don't want things to go prolonged. They want to kind of speed up the game here so that people can keep their interest. But then you head to the playoffs, and I'm glad they kept the whole fact that you don't get the ghost runner and you still get to play traditional baseball. And it was great to see that play out here in the World Series. I believe the game didn't end until 1:30, maybe 2 a.m. I fell asleep after the Shohei home run. I believe that was in the 7th inning. So I was definitely not a part of this entire stay up late gang here, but a very interesting game. Ohtani, 4 for 4. He was walked 5 times and had 3 RBIs. The whole walk thing. Now, I saw this proposed by one of the broadcasters who called the game that night. They want to now propose something where you can only walk a player so many amount of times per game. I believe they wanted to cap it at 2 times a game. You can intentionally walk a player. That would be horrible. I don't know how you could even implement something like that when you start to look at what baseball is and pitching around a player. I mean, you could technically say I'm not going to intentionally walk him, but then just throw 4 straight balls. So I don't think that's ever something that you can implement within baseball. I think it would be horrible if you did as well. It's kind of a if you want to look at it, I'll put it this way. If you want to look at it in the fact of you're taking away one of the greatest players that people came to watch, they are so great, and that's why you want to intentionally walk them. Now, I will say I'm not a huge fan of intentionally walking players. I think you have to earn your spot on base. I get it if you want to maybe go for a double play, but I know when the Phillies played the Dodgers and they walked Ohtani, I was not a fan of that. Ohtani was not playing well at the time. You gave a free base, and then things fell apart from there. I'm not a huge fan of intentionally walking in general, but I don't think it's also something that you should implement a rule in. I think baseball in general need to sit there and stop trying to make baseball more than it is, try and implement themselves so much into it and changing the sport as it was America's pastime. It's now just becoming so international now that you have the Blue Jays in the World Series, but I just don't think that's something that should happen. And that was in Game 3 where Ohtani went absolutely berserk. Now, Ohtani did not play as well at the plate in Game 4 last night, but he did pitch well, going about 6 innings there. The Blue Jays win this one 6-2 over the Dodgers. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs on a 2-run home run. So a very interesting series, as I said before. Game 5 will be tonight at 8 o'clock. The Dodgers have their last home game in the postseason tonight. Can the Dodgers get one, or is it going to be Blue Jays win tonight and then they just have to win one more at home? It's going to be very interesting. I'll definitely be up for this one, but a few more housekeeping things we need to talk about within the MLB. So that was the World Series. Love everything going there. Again, let me know what you guys think, who you're rooting for. I have the Blue Jays in this one. It was hard to go against America and the Dodgers, but just love everything about the Blue Jays, everything going around with that team, all the younger players, all the non-star players who really stepped up for them as well. But let me know what you guys think. So the next big discussion that comes with the World Series is the spending of teams. And you look at the Dodgers, and yes, They spend an incredible amount of money to bring in all of the biggest stars. And yes, I am very against the Dodgers, so I want to put that out there, make that very, very clear. But I also look at it now as other teams can spend the same amount of money. Yes, it's obnoxious what the Dodgers spend. Yes, they have the bigger market, but all of these owners are millionaires. You might not have the same funding necessarily. You might not be bringing in the same revenue, but you have the money to make it happen. You have to make yourself and your organization desirable for these players to want to come in and for you to be able to spend that amount of money. Now, you look at a team like the Mets, who've spent so much money this offseason, they didn't even make the playoffs. So I wouldn't necessarily lean on the fact that the best teams are the ones spending the most money anymore, because you do also still have to perform on the field. Yes, I could bring in 1,000 great players, but if they're not performing on the field, then the money only can get you so far. And you saw that this year with Juan Soto and the Mets. So if we want to look at it more locally, the Phillies are, again, another one of the top 5 spending teams, and they have continued to get worse and worse and worse as the years go when it comes to the postseason. So looking here at the top 5 active payrolls, you have the Dodgers, the Mets, the Phillies, the Yankees, and the Cubs. All those teams making the playoffs except the Mets, as I just mentioned. But then you look at the bottom 5 here, and you have going from the very least up to the top, up to 5 in there. You have the White Sox, Nationals, Marlins, Rays, and Guardians. The Guardians did make the playoffs, so they were able to do something with the little they were spending, but White Sox, Nationals, Marlins, Rays, these teams are not spending enough money. I know the Pirates are a big one, too, when it comes to this conversation, where they're just not helping out Paul Skeens. I mean, they're really literally using him as their only source of income right now, with all the art marketing and all the advertisements that you're able to get with him, but they're not taking that next step to bring in anybody else to help him. It's, let's just work with what we have, and then you're keeping him captive to where he's probably never going to win anything in his career as long as he stays there with the Pirates. So as much as I hate the Dodgers, and I want to sit here and say, oh, they're cheating, baseball is being ruined because of this, all these other teams can do it. The Brewers, another team that they don't make much money, they don't have much income there in Milwaukee, but they're still a team that was just a few wins away from making the World Series. So I wouldn't blame that anymore. I would like to look here more at the base. I think there needs to be a floor on baseball spending, not a cap. I think if you can go out there and you can spend $1 million, or hundreds of millions of dollars on players, go ahead. But then if you're going to be a cheap owner and you're only going to spend a few $100,000 each year on players, then yeah, you're not going to make the playoffs. You're not going to have a great of a push because you're not taking it enough. Like, how am I going to put this? You're not caring enough about your organization to want to put the money into it and then get your investment back on the World Series or on the playoffs and just bringing fans into seats. That's the argument with that anymore. But again, let me know what you guys think. Final thing here on baseball I want to talk about, because obviously I posted something on LRBuzz_pod about it. It's the recent Bryce Harper comments. Now, Bryce Harper obviously has come in here and he's made his difference in Philadelphia, but in the past few years it's just not been hitting the same. And this past year especially, he had a very lackluster season that Dave Dombrowski did not take lightly, and he went out there and he made it clear in a press conference that Bryce Harper was not playing his best and that he wasn't sure if he can get back to his prime days. So what did Bryce Harper have to say about this? I quote, "I have given my all to Philly from the start. Now there is a trade talk. I made every effort to avoid this and heard it all in D.C. with the Nationals. I hated it. It makes me feel uncomfortable." Bryce Harper, maybe it's time you feel a little bit uncomfortable. I feel like in your career, everything has been very laid out ahead of you. You've had everything you've needed. Now in Philly, you had your MVP year. You had the bedlam at the bank. But besides from that, it's kind of been lackluster for Bryce Harper's time here in Philadelphia. Now, he didn't have a horrible season this year. It was very average. I believe he had 27 home runs, hit about 260, but I'll keep going back to the same argument I made before. Those are the same kind of numbers that Nick Castellanos was putting up, average-wise, OPS-wise, and everybody is riding him out of town. So if he wanted to do that, then Bryce Harper also has to step up. And I kind of like the fact that Dave Dombrowski poked the bear there. Maybe we see another Bryce Harper MVP season next year as he's looking to prove it. With Bryce Harper's comments, I think they were a little out of pocket. I don't think there was ever a world where Bryce Harper was getting traded from the Phillies. Yes, if fans want to speculate and everything else, or talking heads want to speculate, that's one thing. But for Bryce Harper to take that as verbatim and say, people are riding me out of town, or Dave Dombrowski wants me out of town, I don't believe that's the case whatsoever. I think it was Dave Dombrowski speaking to the media, but also speaking loud enough that Bryce Harper could hear it and maybe light something under him, because he has kind of fallen off. He's not the same dog that he was once in his career. He's become more the family, the look at me, the marketing guy with the rivalry packs and everything else. I need to see a flame lit under Bryce Harper. I think if you bring back a lot of his guys like JT and Schwarber that could do that. Now, again, I'm not huge on Schwarber coming back, and I've been seeing a lot more of what the contracts could look like for Kyle Schwarber. And again, I just think it's way too much for where he's at in his career. yes, he had an incredible season this year, but I don't think you can continue to pay somebody and expect the same product. Now, you're going to be losing about 100 RBIs with losing Kyle Schwarber, but at the same time, I think it's time to start flipping that new page. Let Harper be the guy who can carry this team. Don't rely on a Trey Turner or Kyle Schwarber. Bryce Harper was brought in here to be that guy, and I think it's time that he starts to get back to that guy and be the man that the Philadelphia needs from him. But that was everything on baseball. When we come back from the short timeout, I'll have a lot on college football, so stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHE. I'm your host, CJ Tully, and yes, we have lots to talk about here in college football. This is another big weekend when it comes down to playoff seeding and top seeding within all of these conferences as things are starting to wind down, and we're getting very close to the end of college football season. So as always, let's talk some college football. Talk about here when it comes to college football is a bit of a discussion here about two teams that I talked about heading into this weekend that I now think things are playing out a little bit differently for them. That is Vanderbilt and Ole Miss. Now you look at the top seeding here within the SEC, and it's Texas A&M 5-0 in the conference, Alabama 5-0 in the conference, Georgia 4-1 in the conference, having lost to Alabama, and then sitting here at the bottom, you have Ole Miss 4-1 as well, and Vanderbilt 3-1. Can both of these teams make the playoffs? Very unlikely that that's the case, but which of the two has the better chance? So heading into the weekend, I obviously thought it was Ole Miss. Let's talk about how things played out here. So Ole Miss went to Oklahoma, and we know what that Oklahoma defense has been, but John Mateer hasn't been the same, and that's been the difference maker here for Oklahoma. They were going to the game ranked 13th, fall 5 spots after that, and I think Oklahoma has certainly written themselves out here of a playoff push, which is a shame because John Mateer before the injury was phenomenal, but in this game here, Oklahoma now 6-2, Mateer 17 for 31, 223 yards and a touchdown, and as I mentioned, just not the same guy. He was able to be a dual threat. He was running around everybody before that injury, and it looks like he's just playing a little bit too cautious now, and he's not putting his body on the line, which completely understandable, but it's completely changed what this Oklahoma team's format has been. On the Ole Miss side of things, currently ranked number 7 now at 7-1 on the season. As I said before, 4-1 in the SEC. And Trinidad Chambliss has been the difference for them. Starting the season as their backup quarterback, coming in here and completely taking over this Ole Miss offense. In this game, he was 24 for 44, 315 yards with a touchdown. But you look at his season stats, and they are very, very impressive. 1,800 yards, 9 touchdowns to just 1 interception. He's also got 376 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. So Trinidad Chambliss, somebody to keep an eye on. There's been a little bit of talks about him in a possible Heisman run. I don't see that necessarily for him, but I do think the way that he's holding down this offense has been phenomenal, and Lane Kiffin has done a great job at coaching him that way. Now, pairing up with Trinidad Chambliss is a running back who is highly underrated right now in college football. That's Kawan Lacey. 27 carries for 78 yards and 2 touchdowns against, again, a very good Oklahoma defense. On the season now, 696 yards and 12 touchdowns for Lacey. So, going forward here, what does Ole Miss have to worry about? Well, 7-1 currently on the season, and looking at the schedule, there's nobody that's truly scaring me until you get to the end of the season, but they'll be home versus South Carolina this upcoming week. And yes, South Carolina did give Alabama a good run for their money, but at the same time, I think that was more a letdown by Alabama, more so than South Carolina proving something to me. I know South Carolina got close last year as well, but just liking to see here a great Ole Miss offense working against South Carolina. Then they'll go to the Citadel Bulldogs. I'm going to be honest, never heard of them. I think that's an easy win there for them. And then they'll be home versus Florida. Now, Florida has given a lot of teams some trouble just on the defensive end alone. They obviously don't have the greatest offense. They fire Napier as their head coach. But the problem wasn't the defense. So as long as Ole Miss offense can perform like they have been against this Oklahoma defense and other great defenses, they should be fine. My fear would be a lackluster Ole Miss defense performance again, and you let DJ Lagway get a few points on the board to where it can be a close enough game that the defense maybe can win it for Florida. But again, not too worried about that, just some speculation there with that. But they finished the season at Mississippi State. And I've watched a few Mississippi State games now this season. Obviously, they're not the greatest team. They're not standing off the page. But they give people trouble when they're at home. And the cowbells are actually insane. I had to turn down the volume every time I watched a Mississippi State home game because they are so obnoxious. They beat Arizona State at home. They just gave Texas a run for their money. I think Mississippi State could play a bit of a factor here within the Ole Miss finishing out the season. Now, Ole Miss is going to be playing for a spot within that SEC championship game or trying to get that automatic bid with just being a great record. If Mississippi State goes into that game and they give them a hard time and the students show up and they give Ole Miss a hard time, that could be a game to watch out for that I don't think enough people are talking about. Yes, I think Ole Miss is the much better team, but I think that environment and the stakes in that game where Mississippi State isn't going to be playing for something, while Ole Miss could be playing for everything, in-state rivalry, that game could mean something for both teams in that aspect of things. Now moving down to the Vanderbilt game, they took on Missouri at home. They win this one 17-10. Vanderbilt now ranked number 9 in the country with a 7-1 start to the season, only lost to Alabama, and they're now 3-1 in the SEC. Now, this game you can look at as more so of a Missouri letdown than I think a Vanderbilt win. And I hate to say that because I'm high on Vanderbilt, but you look at the way they played, nothing really stood out to me here. They kind of got through this game more so than anything else. Bo Pavilo went out early. I think if he stayed in this game, they would have had a much better shot to actually knock off Vanderbilt here. But Missouri now 6-2 on the season. They are, again, most likely eliminated here from playoff contention. Pavilo went 9 for 14 for 68 yards before he got knocked out. Matt Zollers then fills in for him. He goes 14 for 23 with 138 yards and a touchdown. Now, another very underrated running back in college football is Ahmed Hardy. He has 20 carries for 97 yards in this one, but he has had a tremendous season, and I think he needs to get his flowers as well. Now going over to the Vanderbilt side of things, Diego Pavea, 10 for 19, 129 yards, and an interception, so nothing too big from the air from him. He did have a rushing touchdown, though, and he's a leading rusher on the season with 458 yards and 5 touchdowns. Through the air, though, 1,600 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions on the season. Now, again, like I said, nothing really stood off the page for me here. Lead wide receiver with 62 yards, that was Trey Richardson. Then Macklin Young, he had 86 yards and a touchdown on the ground. But let's look at this remaining schedule here for Vanderbilt, see how things could play out. Do they have a true shot here to make the playoffs? Now, it's going to get very difficult this weekend as they're going to be at Texas. Again, Texas hasn't played tremendous, but they're tied with Vanderbilt right now, 3-1 in the SEC. This game means a lot for both teams if they want to have a chance to make that playoff push, as the SEC championship game is going to be most likely their best route to get that to happen. So they'll be at Texas this weekend. They'll then be home versus Auburn, which Auburn keeps it close. They've given a few teams some troubles there. They'll be home versus Kentucky. Kentucky, same thing there with them. They've given some teams some trouble. And I think that's the biggest thing with these smaller end schools. And Vanderbilt used to be one of those schools where they can upset, they can keep things close, they can make it difficult for you, even though they're not playing for something. And that's why I think when people overlook these games of maybe it's not ranked on ranked, but these unranked teams, especially when they're home, can give some real trouble to these ranked teams, and they can cause a lot of difficulty there within the top 8, within the AP top 25. So again, another game to keep an eye on there. And then at Tennessee to finish out the season. Now, Tennessee has not been the best team this season. I love what Joey Aguilar has done, though. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he's the problem whatsoever. But the Tennessee defense has scared me a little bit. They also had a very close game against Mississippi State. So what can happen here with Vanderbilt? If they lose one of the games to Texas or Tennessee, I'm pretty sure that would automatically... Actually, if they lose another game, that would pretty much knock them out of any contention here, especially with them being SEC matchups, and that would just knock them out of any contention there for the SEC Conference Championship. So when it comes down to these two teams, I would have to say pretty handily Ole Miss has the much better chance to make it happen. And if you're asking me if who makes the playoffs, who would make the most noise, I think Ole Miss has a much better chance to make some noise there within the playoffs. Again, Trinidad Chambers playing phenomenal. Kawan Lacey, very underrated on the ground. And I love what Lane Kiffin has done with this team, the energy he's brought, the dog that he has brought. And you look at next year in this coaching little situation I'll get to in just a bit with LSU and everything opening up there. Lane Kiffin's going to be a top contender for a lot of these positions. Ole Miss is going to have to pay him a lot to want to make him stay. So I think Ole Miss has to win the or not necessarily have to win the championship, but they have to make some noise. Again, you have to be appealing to Lane Kiffin to want to stay, and if not that, to want somebody else to come in here and them to find this job worthy of their time and their energy. So Ole Miss over Vanderbilt, in my opinion. Again, Diego Pavea, he likes to say that he's up for Heisman, that he has a good shot for it, but he hasn't really done anything, in my opinion, to make that the case. He's played very well, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's reached the level of some of these other possible Heisman contenders. Now, two other teams I want to compare here that played this weekend, two teams that I have as my number one. Well, I won't spoil my top 10, but they're up there on my top 10 in college football right now. Starting off here with Indiana. They have a huge win over UCLA, 56-6. Now, I had UCLA to cover this one. I believe it was 27.5, 25.5. And UCLA just did not show up. They were putting up tremendous numbers the past 3 weeks. They were able to upset Penn State. They beat Maryland. They beat Michigan State. UCLA was kind of rolling there on offense, and I thought they'd at least give a little fight to this Indiana team. That was just not the case whatsoever. Heading into this game, Indiana this season was first in points per game differential with plus 34.5. They were second in points per game with 45.4. They were second in points per game allowed with just 10.9 points allowed. And then their sack differential, they were first with plus 23 on the sacks. So, again, Indiana very dominant, but I thought this UCLA team would be able to kind of dink and dunk over this Indiana defense. That was just not the case. Indiana, though, 8-0 right now, 5-0 within the Big Ten. They're currently ranked number 2 in the country. Fernando Mendoza, my pick for Heisman. I sprinkled a little bit on him about a month ago now, and that's looking like a great bet. 15 for 22, 168 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception in this one. He also had a rushing touchdown. Now, on the season, 1,900 yards, 24 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions. Fernando Mendoza has been phenomenal. His brother was able to come in this game and play a little bit as well at quarterback, so you love to see that. Running back, a very good dual threat here. And Roman Hemby, 17 carries, 81 yards with 2 touchdowns. And then Keelan Black, one of their number 1 backs on the season, 10 carries for 70 yards in this one as well. Now, that wide receiving core, again, very, very deep. That's why I think this Curt Cignetti-led team has been able to get it done on so many different levels. E.J. Williams Jr., 5 receptions, 109 yards, 2 touchdowns. Elijah Surratt, their number 1 wide receiver on the season, he only had 6 yards in this one, but yet he still gets in the end zone. On the season, Surratt has 609 yards with 10 touchdowns. They also have the top 5 scoring defense and offense. Obviously, that comes into play here with all those stats I just read off and with everything that's been going on with all these dominant wins. They beat Illinois by 63-10, which is a huge one. They're able to beat Iowa 20-15, so they won in a tight one. They upset Oregon on the road 30-20. They beat Michigan State 38-13, and Michigan State's another team that's able to put up points, but not against this Indiana squad. Aiden Fisher also had a pick 6 in this game. So again, getting it done on defense, getting it done on offense. They held UCLA to 1 for 11 on third down and for just 201 yards total offense in the game. Indiana dominant. They are very highly ranked for me, and I think that they can finish out the season undefeated. I think they'll go to the Big Ten championship against most likely Ohio State, and I think that's going to be a game for the ages. I think winner of that is going to make a big statement within the Big Ten, especially for years going forward. Now, another team that, if you've listened to me at all, you know I'm very, very high on here. That's Texas A&M. They also had a very dominant win this past weekend. Currently ranked number 3 in the country. Nothing changes there. But they beat LSU on the road 49-25. They took over in that second half. LSU had no chance at that point. Texas A&M now 8-0 on the season, 5-0 in the SEC as they are number 1 ranked there in the SEC. Marcel Reed, 12 for 21, 202 yards, 2 touchdowns with 2 interceptions in this one. Again, you don't like to see those interceptions. You want to obviously take that down a little bit. But he was also their lead rusher in this game with 108 yards and 2 touchdowns, including an incredible, I'd say about 20-yard run that he was just getting around everybody. Running back, Reuben Owens II, 44 yards on the season, though, 440 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's had to step up since Le'Veon Moss is now out for, I believe, the season. With wide receivers, the 2 lethal weapons, keep that in mind. I'll be making a post about that in just a bit. Casey Concepcion, 3 receptions, 45 yards and a touchdown. He now has 7 touchdowns on the season. Mario Craver, 4 receptions, 42 yards, 4 touchdowns now on the season. So many weapons on this team that I think you just can't look past. I think you have to give full credit to this Texas A&M offense. And yes, they maybe haven't been the best team in the longevity of things. You look at a Georgia and Alabama and LSU, a Texas. Those are the teams you look at and you respect more when they're playing well. But I think you can't overlook what this Texas A&M team's been doing and the weapons that they've been doing it with. It is very fun to watch. If you haven't watched an A&M game, highly suggest watching it. It is very exciting to see how many weapons they're able to work with there on offense. So some other games to keep an eye on here that did happen this weekend that I think are teams that people might be overlooking. Again, there's a lot of overlooking here in college football because you are so used to the name-state names. You're used to the LSU, the Alabama, the Penn State, the Ohio State. But there's a lot of teams branching out now that you've opened up this playoff format, which I'm a huge fan of. That's what got me to fall in love with college football last year. There's so many teams that you maybe aren't aware of who can go out here and make a difference and make a name for themselves each season. So going over a few of those games, you had Memphis go to South Florida and come back in that one, winning 34-31. They're now 7-1 on the season, and they are making some noise in the American Conference, so keep an eye on Memphis. You also had Alabama beat South Carolina 29-22. Just mentioned that one. BYU beats Iowa State 41-27. BYU also making a lot of noise here within the Big 12. Bear Brockmeyer has been an absolute dog for them there at quarterback. Texas beats Mississippi State 45-38, but that one took overtime. So again, that Mississippi State team at home, they are so lethal and so dominant, and I think that teams need to take them more seriously and really need to work on that road environment there. Michigan, they beat Michigan State 31-20. Michigan State with a late cover there. And then Houston beats Arizona State 24-16. Houston now 7-1 on the season and making some noise as well. We're going to take a quick time out here. When we come back, I'll finish up college football talk as well as get into some NFL. There's a lot happened there as well. Stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHE. Welcome back to Locker Room Buzz. As I mentioned, I do want to get into what's been going on with the Brian Kelly news, with all the coaching firings. There have been so many names that have been let go this season. And I think a lot of this does play into the fact that you do have the NIL deals now, and you do have the transfer portal. And a lot of these people can go to a new position. They can see who's going to spend the most amount of money, and that's going to open up a lot of doors and a lot of opportunities for them. So I think that has a huge part to play in everything that's been going on here with all these firings. But Brian Kelly being fired was one of the biggest. That's what Texas A&M can do to a team and get your coach fired. But Brian Kelly at LSU, he's been there since 2022. His record in that time was 34-14. He did have back-to-back 10-win seasons from 2022 and 2023. In 2022, he also won the SEC West Division title. And in 2023, he was able to coach Jaden Daniels to his Heisman Trophy. Also to mention here, since 2022, he has 17 SEC victories, which is only behind Alabama and Georgia. So they're in the upper echelon of SEC teams there. So who are some teams that I think, or some coaches that I think could be looking at this LSU opportunity? Just made a post of a podcast I put up there on Let's Talk Sports, and that's on Instagram at LRBuzz_pod. You can check out the graphic. Getting more used to Canva, so going to be seeing more graphics on my social media. But first name here I have is Marcus Freeman, the head coach of Notre Dame. Now, as a Notre Dame fan, I don't necessarily want to see this, but I think it could be interesting, and as I'll mention, there's some interesting ties there between him and LSU. So he is 38-12 in his time with Notre Dame, and he did turn down the LSU defensive coordinator job to rejoin Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. So, as I mentioned, very interesting ties there, where he was already offered a position by LSU, turned it down to work with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, and now has the same opportunity to possibly come back to LSU in a head coaching position. So we'll see if Marcus Freeman wants to take that. Again, I think he enjoys what he has there at Notre Dame, the culture he's built, and the way that he's gotten Notre Dame back to winning football. But when you look at an SEC position and the amount of money he's going to be offered, can he turn that down? Now, another team you can look at here is Brent Keyes from Georgia Tech, their head coach. He was an Alabama offensive line coach with Nick Saban in 2016 through 2018, so he has that SEC experience. He's also 26-16 in his time at Georgia Tech. Another coach here, staying in the SEC, would be Missouri head coach Eli Drinkwitz. He's with the team since 2020. He is 27-7 since 2024. And in 2023, he was able to bring the team to a number 8 finish and a Cotton Bowl. So he has some winning experience here within the SEC. And obviously, you know what Missouri's doing this year and how he was able to work with Bo Pribula and get him to the point that he is at now. Finally, a coach that has been standing out to a lot of people this season because Tulane has been making a lot of noise and they are not yet ruled out for anything. That's John Sumrall. Hot name within the Power 4. A lot of teams are going to be looking at him. Again, you have openings in the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC. Lots of openings. He is 15-6 with Tulane. He played at Kentucky, and he worked with the linebackers at Ole Miss and Kentucky as well. He also did have a little coaching stint with Troy. So lots of experience there for him. Some other names that I could throw out here, but they're more, I guess, out there, would be James Franklin from Penn State. I'm not sure an SEC team is going to want to bring in James Franklin when James Franklin has only proven that he can't win the big games, and every game in the SEC is a big game, and you're going to be playing a lot of heavy talent. And, I mean, James Franklin couldn't even beat Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, so I'm not sure they're going to want to go that route with things. Some other names, though, Nick Saban and Urban Meyer, if they want to come out of retirement, this is a very appealing job, could give a lot of money there. Again, I think this would be more so leaning to Urban Meyer. I truly do believe that Nick Saban is done coaching. He doesn't like the way that the game has changed, and I don't think anything can bring him back from that, especially what he's doing with College Game Day. I don't think he'd want to leave all of that. And then Lane Kiffin, finally. I think he is going to be the number one name out there for all of these coaching positions. Florida and LSU. One of them is going to be making the biggest push to get him. Ole Miss is going to have to factor that in as well. Like I said before when talking about Ole Miss, they have to appeal to Lane Kiffin to make him want to stay there, because I think Florida and LSU are going to be offering so much money for Lane Kiffin to come over and change their culture, because he did the same thing with Ole Miss. So, again, let me know what you guys think. You call in at 610-701-9243. If you do think any of these coaching options work, I would say Lane Kiffin is the best fit. I think he brings the most culture, he brings the most passion, and I think he would stay there in the SEC and get it done with a winning squad. Finishing out here on college football, though, did want to give you guys some games to watch this weekend. You can watch Penn State at Ohio State. Now, this game is definitely not as appealing as it would have been there at the start of the season. Vanderbilt at Texas, mentioned what that one means for the SEC standings. Miami at SMU. Miami currently ranks number 10. They had that loss to Louisville most recently. If they lose to SMU on the road, I think it's going to be very interesting what the people picking who's in the playoffs is going to do about Miami, because I feel like that would just have to eliminate them at that point, especially when it comes to SEC championship possibilities or ACC championship possibilities. I feel like that would knock Miami out of contention for that as well. Another big game within the American Conference is Navy 7-0 at North Texas, who is 7-1. That's going to have a lot of implications on the playoffs, because I do think the team that comes out of the 6 independent schools is going to be from the American Conference, and it's looking right now like it could be Navy or North Texas. You're going to have number 5 Georgia head to Florida. Mentioned what that Florida defense can do and how tricky it can be, and it could be a trap game there for Georgia. South Carolina will head to Ole Miss. Just mentioned everything with that one. Oklahoma and Tennessee, they'll be playing each other. This is just for craps and giggles here. I think Tennessee might have a chance still to make a playoff push, but I think Oklahoma's completely out. You're going to have number 23 USC headed to Nebraska. Now, USC is interesting. They're still 5-3 on the season, and they're 3-1 in the Big Ten. With being 3-1 in the Big Ten, if they can continue to win here, they could make a bid for themselves to get into the Big Ten championship game, or try and work things out to get into a possible playoff late pick there for them, given their standing. So that would be interesting to keep an eye on. Cincinnati, number 17 at 24, Utah. Cincinnati 7-1. They only had that loss in Nebraska to start the season, and they're 5-0 in Big Ten play. I think Cincinnati could be a team that could come in here and get a playoff spot without winning the conference championship, but I think it'd be a lot easier for them to just win the championship. So, as I promised, I'll give you guys my top 10 in college football right now. I do break it down on a podcast at Let's Talk Sports if you want to check out the full breakdown. But starting at number 10 here, I have BYU. They are 8-0 with their biggest wins coming from Arizona, Utah, and Iowa State. They will play Texas Tech at some point this season, which is going to be huge implications for the Big 12, so pay attention to that game. Number 9, I have Vanderbilt at 7-1, but like I said, I could see that changing very soon. I don't think Vanderbilt's going to be able to keep up with everything else going on here within this top 10. Oregon 7-1, they haven't had the big win since that Penn State game, and now that Penn State game is not looking as tremendous. They did get James Franklin fired, though. 7, I have Ole Miss. I love what Ole Miss is doing. Georgia at number 6, they're 6-1. Georgia Tech right in front of them at number 5 at 8-0. I know a lot of people are giving me some crap about my pick there, having Georgia Tech in, that they haven't played great competition and all of that. But Haynes King is the difference maker for me, and he has been able to carry this team for the entirety of the season. And yes, it comes very much down to what Haynes King is able to do. I understand that. 1,400 yards in the air, 7 touchdowns, and an interception. He also has 651 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns. The guy's an absolute dog. He finds ways to win, and I just can't bet against that. Number 4, Alabama, 7-1. I love Alabama right now. Love the way they bounced back from the Florida State game to start the season, and Ty Simpson is looking like a potential Heisman there. Number 3, I have Ohio State, 7-0 on the season. Yes, they are ranked in the top few at the start of the season, but they haven't done anything to prove to me anything this season, other than the fact that they beat a Texas team that obviously hasn't played out and panned out to be as well as everybody thought. Number 2, give me Indiana. They have big wins over Illinois, at Iowa, and at Oregon. That Oregon game being the difference maker there for me against them and Ohio State. And then number 1, Texas A&M, 8-0. They have a big win at Notre Dame and a big win at LSU. They also have some big ones against Mississippi State and Florida that, again, people might not think that those are big wins, but you got to look at the fact that, again, Mississippi State, hard to play. Florida has a great defense, so we'll see what happens with everything. I'll give you guys actually 3 teams that I have on the outside looking in that I think could take that Vanderbilt spot or that Oregon spot if they aren't able to get those big wins. That's Notre Dame, 5-2. Wanted to have them in the top 10 because I do think they're one of the best teams in college football. But they do have a loss to Miami. They do have a loss to Texas A&M. And they do have 2 losses, so I couldn't put them in there for that reason. But I do think they're going to make the playoffs. Cincinnati 7-1, just talked to you guys about them. And Miami 6-1 as well. Coming off that big loss, though, I thought they'd fall back a little bit further in the AP poll. So we'll see what Miami's able to do with SMU coming up this weekend. I'm going to cut to a bit of an early break here just so we can get everything in with the NFL on the other side. But stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHE. Welcome back to Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully, and that just gives you a quick dopamine boost every time that final segment song hits. Let's talk about some NFL, though. We had some big games and things to get to here with that. You start here with the Vikings and Chargers game that you had here to start Thursday night. Chargers win this one 37-10, moving to 5-3 on the season. Carson Wentz, it seems like malpractice having him out there again. He was clearly hurt with that shoulder injury, but they didn't want to bring McCarthy back. He goes 15 for 27, 144 yards with a touchdown and an interception. But again, I just don't think Carson Wentz was ready to go out there and play. But anyway, you had Justin Jefferson, 74 yards. Justin Herbert, though, a big day for him in the Chargers, 18 for 25, 227 yards, 3 touchdowns with an interception. On the ground, Kamani Vidal has stepped up huge for the Chargers this season, 23 carries, 117 yards, and a touchdown. Ladd McConkey continuing to get it done as well with 88 yards and a touchdown. Moving on to Sunday, we had the Dolphins upset the Falcons 34-10. Dolphins now 2-6 on the season. Falcons fall to 3-4, and Kirk Cousins had to step in this game without Penix playing, but even Bijan Robinson didn't show up in this game. Bijan just had himself 25 yards on the ground. Kirk Cousins with 173 through the air. Tua had a solid day, though, 20 for 26. 205 yards with 4 touchdowns, and Jalen Waddle, 99 yards and a touchdown. Next game to talk about here, the Bengals and the Jets. Who would have thought this would be the most interesting, high-scoring, entertaining game of the weekend? Jets win this one 39-38 to pick up their first win of the season. And what are things going to be coming out of this AFC North? You look at the way the Bengals are playing, the Ravens are playing, the Steelers are playing. Who's going to be the top dog to come out of here? It's very up in the air right now, and you might not even have that great of a team coming out of this. A lot of those coaches could be on the hot seat as well. But Justin Fields in this one, what a bounce-back game for him, by the way. Having, I believe, just 70 yards total offense, 17 yards, something like that, the week before. 21 for 32, 244 yards, and a touchdown. Breece Hall, 18 carries for 133 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he threw for a touchdown. And then Tyler Johnson on tight ends day, 64 yards and a touchdown. Joe Flacco, though, again, always going to be airing it out. 21 for 34, 223 yards with 2 touchdowns. He also rushed for a touchdown there. Samaje Perine, he gets his name in on things. 9 carries, 94 yards, and a touchdown. And then Jamar Chase held to 91 yards on 12 receptions. This next game here stands out big time to me. That's the Patriots and the Browns. Patriots win this one 32-13. The Patriots now 6-2 on the season. And it's been a tremendous season there for the Patriots, but I'll just go over the Browns real quick. Dylan Gabriel, 12 for 35, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. People are saying that it's time to bring Shedeur Sanders in. I still don't hate Dylan Gabriel. I just think he needs more weapons on the outside to get things done. Judkins only 9 carries for 19 yards. Again, uncharacteristic of what he's been able to do this season. I think the Browns' offense is built for the future, and I think that defense could get it done in the future as well. Myles Garrett, just to note, did have 5 sacks in this game in that big loss. But Drake May, 18 for 24, 282 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Looking at his numbers on the season, though, 2,000 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. My favorite for MVP. I think a lot of people's favorite right now for MVP. And looking at these MVP talks, I'm not too sure why Patrick Mahomes is so highly touted right now in that MVP poll. And Josh Allen, I think he should be ruled out of MVP contention right now. Yes, the team has played all right, but he has not been a huge part of that. And I'll get into a bit of a debate on that in just a bit. But Trevion Henderson gets his most touches he's had this season and most 10 carries, 75 yards. Kayshon Boutte, he goes 75 yards and a touchdown as well in this one. So an overall solid day there for the squad. Eagles game, let's talk about that now. They win 38-20 over the Giants to move to 6-2 on the season, and this was one of the best back-to-back performances by the Eagles we have seen in a long time. Jackson Dart does go 14 for 24, 193 yards and a touchdown. And then Cam Scatterbo does have a receiving touchdown, but we saw that injury, very gruesome. I was at PJ Willihan's for that one, and everybody's reaction was everyone was mortified with that. I hope to see him get better soon. I saw he did put something out saying that everyone was treating him well at the hospital and that he respects to Philadelphia fans. He did get a standing ovation on his way back, but a young player who's been making a name for himself, you hate to see the injury. You hope when he comes back, he'll still be that hard-headed, hard-nosed runner there. But let's talk about these Eagles. Jalen Hurts, 15 for 20, 179 yards, and 4 touchdowns through the air without an interception. Jalen Hurts has shown that he can be a dual-threat quarterback. He can do what needs to be done to win games, and now he's doing it through the air. Love everything about that. Saquon Barkley, he comes back to life. 14 carries, 150 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground, and 1 receiving as well. We saw that huge run there for Saquon Barkley. It looked like he was back to his prime. Tank Bigsby, he gets 9 carries for 104 yards as well in this one. They were continuing to pound the rock, and they were able to get it done through the air and on the ground. That's just my biggest takeaway here from this. Devonta Smith, 6 receptions, 84 yards. Jahan Dotson, 40 yards and a touchdown. Dallas Goedert, 3 receptions, 28 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And again, continuing to be that unsung hero here of the Eagles season. Something else to note, the tush-push fumble. I do want to address that because I am big on the tush-push. I don't think it should be banned. I think if they can do it, anybody can do it. One of those kind of arguments for it, but that fumble was horrendous. That was an obvious fumble. Anybody arguing otherwise just doesn't know the game of football. He was still being pushed forward. The momentum was never stopped. That was a clear and blatant fumble. I don't know how they didn't call it that. There was no whistle either. That was horrendous play calling, and I think that just adds to the point of people wanting the tush-push out just because apparently the officials can't officiate it, but I don't think that should also fall on the Eagles for having a winning play just because I think it just needs to be better officiating and a lot better training for these officials because there's been very bad calls. So another thing in this game, though, is A.J. Brown did not play. He was injured. You now have the bye week. People are speculating that could mean he's getting traded and they're trying to keep him healthy. I don't think that's the case. I think that whole A.J. Brown's being traded speculation needs to drop. They're clearly not going to be trading him. I think if they were to trade him, it would be to the Patriots for, I would hope, a wide receiver in return with some draft picks to work towards the future. But I don't think there's anything going on here where A.J. Brown's going to be traded. I think Philadelphia is its worst enemy in that the second something goes wrong, especially the Philadelphia media, likes to jump on that and make that the biggest deal of all big deals. And I think the same thing happened there with the Bryce Harper being traded. Maybe the guy just, okay, I don't like what he does on social media. Let's just put that out there. But I also don't think it means he has to be run out of town. He's still a great player. I wouldn't mind him being moved on from if he gets some pieces back, work towards the future. While you can now see that the receiving core can work without him. I don't know how longevity-wise that would work, but again, not the worst thing if he is shipped out, but I don't think everybody should be preying on it to happen either. It is very enticing, though, the fact that this Eagles offense was able to roll the way it did without him. But again, if you guys want to talk about A.J. Brown, we can have that conversation another day as the show's winding down. But next game to talk about here is the Bills and the Panthers. Bills won this one 40-9, moved to 5-2 on the season, but Josh Allen, is he seemingly getting carried by a running back, much like people thought Jalen Hurts was last year? He went 12 for 19 in this one, 163 yards with a touchdown. He also rushed for 2 touchdowns as well. James Cook, though, 19 carries, 216 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So the biggest thing I want to say with here, and I love Josh Allen. I love the man of Josh Allen. He seems like a really cool guy. But everybody wanted to have the debate last year that Jalen Hurts was being carried by a good running back, that his rushing touchdown shouldn't really count as much because he's not getting it done through the air. And this season, Josh Allen is kind of living out that same life that Jalen Hurts was living out last year within football terms of things, that he's not having the best through the air season this year. He has the 2 big losses. Yes, he's getting it done on the ground, but he's relying on James Cook a lot this season, and that's much like Jalen Hurts was last year, and people weren't a fan of that. So just interesting for me to see this and see the way that it's very double standard when it comes to the way that people want to rip Jalen Hurts, but then the second their golden child of the league falls off a little bit, they don't get that same backlash. Same with Patrick Mahomes. I had this debate last week where if you want to say people shouldn't need great weapons to be good in the NFL, but then you want to say, well, if Josh Allen had the number 1 receiver, or if Patrick Mahomes didn't have people going to jail every week on his team, that they'd be a lot better. I just think that's a double standard that needs to be worked on within sports commentating in general. And as somebody in that position myself, I will work to be better with it as well. But I just think that it's unfair. Moving forward, though, we had the Ravens get their first win in a long time, beating the Bears 30-16. Caleb Williams, 285 yards and an interception. But on the other side of things, Ravens have a lot of speculation as to whether or not they were cheating with telling people that Lamar might be playing and then saying he's not playing, and everything that's going on with the gambling in the NBA. There's a lot. People are really cracking down on all of this now. But Tyler Huntley goes 17 for 22, 186 yards with a touchdown. Derrick Henry, 71 yards with 2 touchdowns there. Then you had the 49ers and the Texans, and don't look now, but the Texans are getting hot at a good time. You look at the rest of that division, obviously the Colts playing phenomenal, but Texans 3-4. They beat the 49ers 26-15. Mac Jones didn't have the best day, 19 for 32, 193 yards, 2 touchdowns with an interception, but this really came down to Christian McCaffrey just not able to get it going with 25 yards. CJ Stroud, though, 30 for 39, 318 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Woody Marks at running back, 11 carries for 62 yards. And then Xavier Hutchinson at wide receiver, 69 yards, nice, and a touchdown. Buccaneers Saints. Buccaneers win this one 23-3 over the Saints, moving to 6-2 on the season. Baker Mayfield did not play well in this one, 15 for 24, 152 yards, but they still get it done. Leading back being Sean Tucker, 12 carries for 42 yards and a touchdown. Tez Johnson, 5 receptions, 43 yards with that very injury-prone wide receiving core right now with Ibuka and his injuries. Looks like Mike Evans is going to be out for a long time. Godwin, a lot of these guys just not able to stay healthy for Baker here. Would be curious if they would be somebody to make a move for a wide receiver at the deadline to kind of fill in a spot. I know Jacoby Myers is a name out there. Let me just throw this out here. Jacoby Myers to the Buccaneers. I think that'd be a great role for him. And I think it'd really help out this Buccaneers wide receiving core as they come back from injuries. Next up, you had the Cowboys. They got demolished by the Broncos, 44-24. Broncos moving to 6-2 on the season, and Bo Nix is looking like the real deal right now. Cowboys fall to 3-4-1. Dak Prescott, 19 for 31, 188 yards with 2 interceptions. Javonte Williams, 41 yards, did get 2 touchdowns, though. And then your good wide receiving core of Pickens and Lamb. Pickens, 78 yards, Lamb, 71. But Bo Nix, 10 for 20, 217 yards, 4 touchdowns with an interception. J.K. Dobbins, 15 carries, 111 yards. R.J. Harvey gets it going for the first time this season, 46 yards with 2 touchdowns. And then Troy Franklin, 2 touchdowns as well, tight end for the Broncos. So Broncos, still keep an eye on them. They were able to beat the Eagles as well, so really starting to get it rolling there for the Broncos. Then you had the Colts and the Titans. And yes, nobody expected this one to be close, but the continued dominance here of the Colts has been phenomenal. 2 MVP contenders there for the Colts. Cam Ward does go 22 for 38, 259 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. But again, storyline is the Colts, 7-1 on the season. Daniel Jones, 21 for 29, 272 yards with 3 touchdowns. And then Jonathan Taylor, pair that up with him. 3 touchdowns on the day, 2 coming on the ground, 1 through the air with 153 yards rushing as well. And then Michael Pittman Jr. coming back to life, 8 receptions, 95 yards with a touchdown. Moving on now to the Packers and the Steelers on Sunday Night Football, a highly anticipated game that just did not necessarily live up to the hype with Aaron Rodgers coming back, and those uniforms were just not it. I would have loved to see old school Packer uniforms versus old school Steelers uniforms, just the blacks for the Steelers, the white typical jerseys that you would expect for the Packers, but do like the iced out little Packer look there. But Packers now 5-1-1, while the Steelers moved to 4-3. Packers winning 35-25. Jordan Love looked great, 29 for 37, 360 yards with 3 touchdowns. Tucker Kraft, what a day for him as well, 143 yards with 2 touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers, he's been playing very well for the Steelers, and I think they were able to have somewhat of a defense. This Steelers team could really make a run. Aaron Rodgers goes 24 for 36, 219 yards with 2 touchdowns. Roman Wilson does get 4 receptions for 74 yards and a touchdown, and DK has 5 receptions for 55 yards and a touchdown as well. Now, Monday Night Football took the Chiefs a while, but they did get it rolling, a 28-7 victory over the Commanders. Patrick Mahomes, 25 for 34, 299 yards, 3 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions. Kareem Hunt, 40 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Rice and Kelsey find the end zone as well, with Kelsey at 99 yards, Rice at 93. Again, a lot of tight ends there within that tight end day on Sunday, but as I mentioned, a lot of great games there. You're starting to see the real teams that are starting to stand out, and the teams that might have been kind of tricking us and now falling out. Might actually be doing a little post or video about tricks or treats, the teams that are tricking us and the teams that are treating us. But before I get out of here, I do want to talk a little bit of the Flyers now. We do have 5 minutes remaining in the program. Flyers in their last 3 games have a loss to the Senators 2-1, but then 2 shootout victories of late. 1 to the Islanders 4-3, and then last night to the Penguins 3-2. And that last night's victory showed a lot to me about this Flyers team. A lot of people saying that yesterday was going to be a game that the Flyers were throwing. They put Harrison in net. They take out one of their back line guys. But they showed up, and they played phenomenal. Sean Couturier on the season now. 2 goals, 7 assists. Trevor Zegras, 2 goals, 7 assists, and he's +4 in the plus-minus, which is phenomenal for him. doing it in all ends of the game. A lot of assists of late, too. It was good to see him start to get on the board. And last night we saw a different side of Zegras. We saw him get a little aggressive right before the end of the third period. He didn't like a hit there in the corner. He started cross-checking a little bit. Then you get to the end of regulation, and he goes up and just knocks the helmet off some of the Penguins players. And I love that kind of dogging him. People are saying it looked a little wuss, like it's over, just let it go. But I like it. Got a little edge to you. Do what you have to do. Bring that little grit to the rivalry of Penguins versus Flyers. Bobby Brink, 3 goals, 4 assists. Noah Cates, 3 goals, 3 assists. And Tyson Foerster has been very, very good this season. 3 goals, 3 assists. But just the impact he makes on the game has been phenomenal for the Fly guys of late. Again, I'm not sure where the Flyers are with their rebuild, where they want to be, if they want to try and make that push. I would love for the Flyers to just make the push. Go out there, get in the playoffs. Just get a taste. Let these young guys feel what it's like. Let Rick Tocchet get these guys going for the playoffs. And you don't necessarily have to keep building this draft pick. If you become appealing enough of a place and you get back to that hockey that Philadelphia, the city of Philadelphia used to be Hockey City, I think then you can get some free agents. You can get some big names to want to come in here, and you don't necessarily have to just work young talent. You have your young talent core with Michkovs. You bring on Zegras. You've got so many guys on the younger side that now you can bring in some veterans. You can bring in some guys who maybe want to change the scenery or want to make a playoff push with some young talent. This could be a very tricky team here when it comes to the playoffs, and when it comes to maybe the next 2-3 years, I think they can start making that push and being a contender for the playoffs, which we haven't seen in so long here with Flyers hockey. I was at the game a few weeks ago, and I said how just my generation of Flyer fan just hasn't been able to attach to the Flyers. You might be a hockey fan, but you can't necessarily love the Flyers because they just haven't given you anything to cheer for. I think people can rally around the Flyers like they have the Eagles and the Phillies if they give them something to appeal to. They become appealing. Right now, the number one thing selling in the shop is gritty gear because nobody knows anybody on this Flyers team, or nobody's been able to relate to this Flyers team. And I think the city needs to fall in love with the team to get that going there for them. And I think it's very possible that could be coming in the next year or two for Philadelphia and the Flyers. Now, the next game the Flyers will be playing is home versus the Preds. That will be tomorrow, 7 o'clock. 4, 5, and 2 are the Predators. They are having a bit of a bounce-back season after a bit of a lackluster season the year before. But that will do it for another episode here of Locker Room Buzz. I'm CJ Tully. You check me out on TikTok and Instagram at LRBuzz_pod. I'm on X now at CJ Tully_LRB. And you can catch my Spotify podcast at Let's Talk Sports. Lots of ways to find me. Lots of ways to hear me. Hope to hear from you next week here. You can call in at 610-701-9243. Always, we can have a discussion there. Have a happy and safe Halloween. If you're in town, I'll probably see you there. So, again, have a great, safe, and happy Halloween. This was Locker Room Buzz.